Aloha and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Got Your Six podcast. This six-question podcast brings together high performers to share their methods, strategies, and ideas, delivered in an informative and, most importantly, actionable way that'll help you lead yourself and those around you from the battlefield to the boardroom. Coming to you every episode, I'm your host, Tony Nash. And into the breach.
Nothing mentioned on this podcast is an endorsement or opinion of the Department of Defense.
I got your six, we got your back. Got your six, we got your back. Got your six, we got your back. I got your six.
Sixers, what a massive treat we have today. The legend himself, Steven Weintraub, is here, Chief Strategy Officer over at Vet Tix. Sir, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Well, thanks for having me, Tony. And when you say legend, my motto is never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And I am not as great as everyone thinks I am.
We'll let the Sixers decide by the end of the episode. How's that?
Okay, I like that.
Doing what you do over at Vet
Sixers. Welcome, Sixers, and thank you for joining and listening and indulging me.
Thank you, sir. We are stoked to have you. Doing what you do over at Vet Tix, sir, before we even go down any stories or anything, I have to ask one question. What is the best concert or ticketed event that you've ever been to?
Oh, geez. Okay. Best concert I've ever been to was probably, and this wasn't through Vet Tix, and I'm old. I'm old AF. So you have to take that into consideration. So probably like the best concert was like when I was in high school, which was like, in the 1900s. And that was probably Rush. And I was, like 17 and I got contact high that I didn't even know what it was. So, I mean, being old school, maybe that, but, going back to old school, Kiss, we did an event with Kiss, through Vet Tix, and was able to get backstage access and meet the band and things like that, and so that was really cool. And for the sake of my wife, I will say Beyonce and Jay-Z.
So you've met Beyonce and Jay-Z through your work at Vet Tix?
No, I just went to that
okay.
concert. We were just concert
Gotcha.
goers, but yeah, I mean, that one, I took one for the team by going
there you go.
Beyonce and Jay-Z.
You have to. And now dealing with such a different industry than what you were dealing with in the Marine Corps, there's still like stakeholders that are in play. How are you taking, a lesson from your time in the military and applying it to what you do over at Vet Tix?
It's the lessons of leadership and experience, and they're very translatable from the military to the private sector. But what you really have to remember is that in the private sector, whether you're working with veterans or not, the way we lead in the military and the way we lead in the private sector are very different. So you have to tailor your leadership style, your leadership skills, how you interact with people, and because we're trained to be very bold and very direct. And a lot of times in the private sector and the civilian world, they don't understand it the way we do. I mean, the knife handing and all that other stuff. So you really, as you transition out, you really have to be cognizant of what you do on the other side of how you're perceived. And the greatest asset we have in the military is we're adaptable. Okay, I mean, we all know that, and you may not realize it, but one day you're in the fire direction center because you're an artillery person, right? Man, woman, not
yes, sir.
Into that whole thing, right? But you're in the FDC, but the next day your boss is like, hey, guess what? You're going to be shepherding the press or whatever through our area, and you've got to be able, and we do it. We change course without breaking stride, and so we're adaptable, and that's where transitioning out of the military, whether it was for 4 years or 30 plus years like me, you got to realize that you got to change, because society isn't going to change around you. You've got to learn how to kind of get into step with the outside.
Yes, sir. And then having that toolkit, right, of all these different experiences from your time in the military, you're very sensitive to what tool you're using. Like, you're not taking a hammer to every problem you're trying to solve. Can you give us a specific example?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's a great analogy. I mean, when you're a hammer, everything you see is a nail, right? But once again, we in uniform, we're great problem solvers, right? I mean, we get our garden variety of complainers and lingerers and things like that, but it's, we're so good and it's second nature for us to problem solve and to figure things out. And that's another one of those things that you forget that you have in your toolkit that adds value to who you are and what you do and how you can be an asset to, the team / organization employer that you want to be a part of.
Can you give us an example of where you kind of had to double check to make sure you're using the right tool to solve a recent problem that you had or experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, when I was younger, and I was I spent 10 years on total active duty, total 32 years, but 10 total active, the other, I'm a Marine, so that's what, hands and fingers, 22 years as a reservist, right? So I lived a double life as a civilian, military reserve. And when I was younger, I always tried to fall back on, sometimes like the military way of trying to solve problems. And a lot of times it was directing people, saying, this is what you're going to do. You're going to do it this way. And civilians, they don't respond well to that. And sometimes you've got to change your communication style, your interaction, and sometimes you've got to incentivize them. And we as military members, we get incentivized by, if it's a unit coin or a medal or a commendation, certificate of commendation, an RCOM or something like that, right? I mean, that's how we get incentivized. And sometimes to get what you need done, you've got to find ways to incentivize people. And it doesn't always cost a whole lot, but it's really changing your approach. And when I was younger, that's what really tripped me up was it's like, I'm telling you to do something. How come you're not doing it? And, being an officer, instant obedience to orders, right? But you've got this employee that's never served, and they're not programmed that way, nor should they be.
So where have you recently looked at opportunities to make sure you're providing the right incentive? I mean, working at Vet Tix, right? Like, everybody wants to go to a concert, but you're constantly dealing with different people, concert venues, all this different stuff. How do you find the right incentive? What's your step list?
A lot of it is personality driven. Okay. And thank yous don't cost anything. And appreciation costs nothing. And so when I build these relationships with our partners and donors, sometimes just the gratitude that they receive from me or the staff at Vet Tix, that goes a long way for us and for me. So and my gratitude is sincere, it's genuine, and people, they can filter that out, right? I mean, especially, us in the military, we got a very, very fine BS filter. So the sincerity of it really goes a long way. And so it's really, sometimes incentivizing them is in the gratitude that you provide to them.
And like you said, just a simple thank you or coming back to someone after they've done you a favor speaks volumes. And I I think some of our listeners recognize that, but being able to just kind of continue to force that, not because you have to, but because, like you said, you are genuinely sincere in your approach and your appreciation for the actions that they did for you and Vet Tix.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll go back to my time in uniform, and I mean, okay, yeah, full disclosure, I was unenlisted, for 2 years, so I know what it's like to be on that, on that side, and then I went over to the dark side, became an officer, all that other stuff, but I always treated my subordinates the way I wanted to be treated, the way I expected to be treated, and once again, that goes a long way in the personal interactions, and very rarely did I have to, like pull rank and command somebody to do something. It was usually an ask, even to, a sergeant or whatever. It's like, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you go over to supply and get me, a box of grid squares? And it wasn't ask. It wasn't, an order, a demand. And so people, appreciate that even when it's coming from somebody from authority.
Yeah, and I know you weren't asking people for grid squares, but that's a common joke in the military, so I appreciate that. Did not go unnoticed. So as a chief strategy officer, how are you challenging yourself to continue to grow not only your organization but yourself on a daily basis?
That's a great question because for me, I'm always trying to learn something new. And I'm old, okay, but it's just like in the military, it's you want to get promoted, you've got to do your professional military education, and professionally outside of the military, I'm always trying to learn and if it's not academically, it's how can I better myself. And I'll tell you one of the things that I had an epiphany about with myself and learning about that is that, we in the military, we have very high standards, right, of performance and conduct. And one of my detriments has been I expect of others what I expect of myself. And when somebody not in the military would fall short of a task or let me down, I get so angry and so upset, and because it goes back to that, hey, when we're in uniform, we're consummate professionals, and we expect perfection. And in the private sector, and even in relationships with your significant other or family or friends, when they let you down, they fall short. For me, I've learned to accept that and cut them the slack. So I'm always looking for, and we're talking, we're on a podcast right now, and there's some amazing podcasts out there that, you can listen to help better yourself in those ways. And in the Marine Corps, one of our leadership traits, the first leadership trait is know yourself and seek self-improvement. And that's what I try to do.
And by knowing yourself, right, you recognize you have to be clear and have that shared understanding of communication with other people, so that expectation isn't, there's such a gap, like you were saying, where you expect at a certain level and other people think, all right, well, this is the best I can do, down here, but there's this massive gap. How have you continued to work on that piece when you're communicating with others or different organizations to kind of level the bubbles, as we like to say in the artillery?
Yeah, and that's critical, expectation management. And when we have very high standards and expectations, and we're interacting with people that just can't meet those, it's communication. Communicating not as direct of what are you capable of, but finding out what they are capable of. What are their, for lack of better terms, breaking points or red lines or whatever, and understanding what those are, not pushing them beyond what they can do. But it is a two-way street. And that's where, with my, my subordinate officers or troops or whatever, as a commander, I would be like, look, this is what I expect of you. But it was a two-way street. It's like, but this is what you can expect of me. But also it's, what is, like I said, where are you on that scale? So I have a better appreciation or understanding of what you're capable of and what you're not.
Do you think that belief and understanding of expectation management has greatly improved your life, say, in the last couple of years? Or is there something else that you could point to and be like, this is it?
I mean, expectation management is a lot of it. And when you have a better understanding or realization that people are not going to live up to the expectations that you set of them, it makes life so much easier. And but the same thing, like I expect a lot of me, but I also, that's where I've found myself stressing myself out, because it's like I got to be at 110% all the time, or like that, or I got to show my boss that I can operate at 110%, and my boss is like, dude, like operate at 85%. You don't need to be at, and that was, if I can tell you an anecdote. So when I was embedded with the Army, 3rd Corps in Iraq in 2005, I'm a LNO with the Army. I'm with 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, and I'm a major. And I'm working in the staff office. I'm a staff pogue at that time, working with soldiers, professional soldiers, on the staff, on the colonel's staff. And I would go to the gym, like, we're in Baghdad, we're at Camp Victory, and they had a bomb gym. So I would go to the gym, like, either like at noon or before then or whatever. And like a lot of my peers, like, wouldn't go to the gym and they'd work till like 1900 or whatever. They'd go to chow, like evening chow, and then they'd come back to work and this and that. And like they would give me like, they'd give me slack. It's like, dude, man, like, where are you going? I'm like, dude, I'm going to the gym. It's like, military Marine Corps is paying me to PT. I'm going to go PT. I don't care that we're in a combat zone or whatever. I mean, we have the facilities. And for me, that was like that stress management, right? And like, I didn't report to that Army. The beautiful thing was I didn't report to that Army colonel that they all did. And that's the great thing about being an LNO, a liaison officer. But regardless, it's like, dude, it's not a race to see who can work the hardest, because you're going to flame out. And so going back to, there's some kind of balance. And for me, I set the expectation that, hey, every day I need to go PT and not at 2200 when I'm physically and mentally smoked all day. And so that was something I learned, from that aspect.
And building in those mental health breaks throughout the day, are the things that kind of give you replenishment, recharge, comes through understanding and also not meeting expectations that you set for yourself, because you have to reach that breaking point to understand, all right, hey, I went a little bit too far, I got to dial it back. What failure could you point to and say, hey, that failure actually led to one of the greatest successes in my life?
When I got back from that tour, I wasn't firing on all cylinders. I had to go see the wizard. And I realized it. When we got back, we got our post-deployment, like, mental health brief. And they were like, if it happens, it's going to be like within about 30, like after about 30 days of you being back. And then like almost like clockwork, almost like day 30, I was not firing, and I wasn't sleeping, or when I was sleeping, I was having, just really weird dreams and this and that. I couldn't power down, and that was all kind of the byproduct of my deployment. And so I came to a crossroads. I was like, okay, am I going to be that guy that powers through this on my own? I'm a man. I don't need anything else or whatever. And am I going to go through life like, broken for the rest of my life? Or do I go get help, right? Know yourself and seek self-improvement. And that's what I did. And I was like, I went to our corpsman, which is, your guys' docs and medics. And I was like, I gotta talk to somebody. And I went and saw the wizard, and he was a great guy, told me what to do, and I did it religiously. And I came out of it. And so it's having the moral courage, right? That we have physical courage, but it's having the moral courage to look, self-assess yourself and be like, am I where I want to be, where I need to be? Am I happy? And, screw this macho BS. Like, oh, I'm a man. I can take this. It's like, why, man? Work smarter, not harder.
No, absolutely. And then for those that don't know, the wizard is like a mental health professional, a counselor, and anytime you go to improve your mental health. Sir, thank you so much for being here. Before you go, though, I have to ask, and we ask everybody that comes on the show, sir, how are you better today than yesterday?
How am I better today than yesterday? Because yesterday is in the past, and I don't live in the past. It's good to have memories. You don't forget. You don't forget things. People, experiences, things like that. But every day is a new opportunity to, basically be better than the day before. So that, to me, is kind of how I, navigate through that.
What was the opportunity today?
The opportunity today was to meet you in person and to be exposed to your Sixers and hopefully something that I rambled on about resonated with it. If it resonated with one person, or if one person told somebody else about something I talked about, then my round hit the target.
Yes, sir. Always steel on steel is what you're looking for. Sir, before we do finish up, where can people go to connect not only with you, but learn more about Vet Tix?
Okay, so if you don't know about Vet Tix, we're an organization, we're a national nonprofit, and we get donated event tickets to sporting events, concerts, ball games, anything where there's a ticket involved. It could be a food truck festival, anything like that. And what we do is we get these donated by sports teams, performers, promoters, venues, and we distribute them to veterans, service members, and first responders as a way to thank them for their service and their sacrifice. So by attending these events, spending some time, an afternoon with your loved one or friends just to make up for lost time, that's what our mission is. And so our website is vettix, VETTIX.org. Sign up, doesn't cost anything to sign up. We got some great events. We had tickets to the Super Bowl. We get all kinds of cool stuff. So check it out, and they can follow me or don't follow me. I mean, why would you do that? But I mean, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, things like that. Follow me out of curiosity, if anything. If you want to follow me, do it out of curiosity. But I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm on our website. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And thank you, Tony, for once again allowing me the opportunity to be one of the many, just really impressive guests you've had on this podcast.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that. And we'll make sure we link all of that in the show notes for this episode. So whenever your people are listening to it, they can always go click on vettix.org to go over there and learn more about this fantastic organization. Sir, again, thank you for sharing your methods, your strategies, your improvement ideas, and most importantly, thanks for having our six today.
Anytime, my friend.
I don't know what you've been told, Sixers, but the lawyers would like us to remind you that the views, opinions, and comments expressed on the Got Your Six podcast are solely those of the hosts or guests, to include current and previous Department of Defense employees, and should in no way be considered the opinions of or endorsements on behalf of the Department of Defense or any of its components, divisions, contractors, or other current and previous staff members.